Good evening all. As this is the first Audit and Risk Committee meeting following the election of council, I'll chair the meeting until we've elected a chair of the committee. So I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance. We have our auditors in attendance and members of the public. Just to remind people that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded in accordance with the city's live streaming and recording meeting policy. So by being present, members of the public consent to the city recording and live streaming their image and or voice. Could I ask Deputy Mayor Winmar to present the welcome to country, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin by acknowledging my elders past and present. Ngalak yeni kurang ngalak noch niji nonga boja. Nonga mo jerpen niji nada. Kobarak nonga boja kurlong. From the beginning of time to the end, this is Noongar country. Noongar people have been graceful keepers of our nation for many, many years. Yeni karagin jerpen niji wen nonga boja gala maya border. Look, listen, understand, and embrace all the elements of Noongar country. This is forever our home. Kai wanjung anko jerpen niji nonga boja dajli wangining nonga boja. Hello and welcome. My heart is happy as we gathered on country and meeting here on Noongar country. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Winmar. I'd also like to acknowledge that we meet here tonight on the traditional land of the Noongar people and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. No apologies. Don't have to worry about leaves of absence. There's no public questions. Election of presiding member. I'd just like to remind people that under the terms of reference for the Audit and Risk Committee, the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee comes from one of the independent members of that committee. At this stage, we've got one nomination for the chair, which is Gay McMath. Is there any other nominations? One. If that's the case, then have a show of hands for Gay McMath to be chair. Thank you all. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'll now pass over to you to do deputy.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the election to chair. I would like.
Sorry, point of order, Your Worship. Chair, could you just turn the microphone on for the...
Thank you. Thank you very much for the election of chair. I'd now like to move to the election of deputy presiding member.
So we have one nomination.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. All those in favour of the nomination of Ben to deputy presiding member. Those in favour? Nil against. Thank you. Congratulations. Do we have any petitions, presentations and deputations today?
No.
None? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest relating to the agenda for this evening? None indicated. Firstly, I'd like to just welcome all the new members to the committee here tonight and congratulate our new mayor and look forward to the participation of the new committee. Could I move to the confirmation of the minutes, please? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Winmar. All those in favour? Nil against.
Adoption of the annual report first, so the auditors can...
Of course.
So we just need to make a motion to move 10.2 first.
Okay. The suggestion of the CEO, it's been suggested that we handle the annual report first, which is 10.2. Thank you. On page 94 of those papers. I'm happy to move that from the chair. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour? Carried. So welcome to the auditors. Moving now to 10.2. Are there any introductory?
Yes, the auditors are here, so we could ask them to give an overview of the audit.
Thank you. Are there any introductory comments by management? Otherwise, I will ask our auditors to join us at the podium, or thank you, to give us an overview of 10.2. Over to the auditors.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thanks for the invitation to attend the meeting. We really do appreciate. Just to let you know, one of our colleagues is stuck in traffic. I think she should be here in about a few minutes. But if that's okay, we'll get started.
I empathise.
Thank you. So my name is Tim. For those that I haven't met before, I'm the Senior Director at the Office of the Auditor General, and I'm the Contract Manager in relation to the City of Kwinana. Here with my colleague Amit from RSM, who are our contracted auditors, who pretty much do all the work on our behalf. But as you all know, we have got direct supervision in terms of the conduct of the audit, and we are here to present the what we call the exit report, which is effectively the report that summarizes all the key elements of our audit process. Before I hand over to Amit to take us through the key elements of the report, just to mention from the OAG perspective, the audit is now all completed. We've gone through all the internal review process, working with the CFO and their team, and we have concluded all the review processes, and obviously subject to the signing of the financial statements by the CEO, we'll be able to issue our audit report. And in that regard, to just confirm as well that our audit report is a clean audit report, which is unqualified and has got no modifications except one matter relating to an emphasis of matter, which we will cover on. Other than that, I'll hand over to Amit to take us through the detail of the report. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thanks, Tim. So I'll take the report as read. I understand it's been in the pack for circulation prior. The report. The report reflects the status of the audit back, as Tim just advised, when the report was issued. And at that point in time, some of the review processes from the OAG was still in progress. But as per Tim's confirmation, that has now been complete. There were only some couple of minor sort of changes to one of the notes back then, nothing significant to bring to the committee's attention. Which have been passed on to the CFO to make those changes. So once we receive those sort of updated accounts, including the certification, we'll package our sort of deliverable back to Tim's office to enable to issue those opinion. So just if I bring your attention to sort of page 3 of our report, which is section 1, or the executive summary. So we talk about in there in terms of the status of the audit. So the first of the 6 matters, the first point was really that final review and clearance, which has now been completed. The remaining points are fairly logistical in nature in terms of us going through the motions in receiving the signed statements and then doing the handover to the OAG office. There are 3 or 4 key areas of audit focus. For the financial audit, we initially presented a plan earlier in the year. The areas that we have covered as part of the final audit have not differed, or they've been consistent with the audit plan presented. There are no new matters that have come to our attention. There are a few internal control observations or matters for improvement. We've got some identified misstatements. Most of them have been adjusted, but there's one that remains unadjusted, but it's not material overall in nature to the entire financial statements. So we're still quite comfortable that the financials overall are not materially misstated. then moving on to sort of couple of key areas in there. So moving on to section 3, page 5 of the report, we consider management overdraft controls as sort of the key risk in pretty much every financial statements audit. There are some standard procedures that we conduct in looking at journal entries, reviewing unusual transactions or transactions with related parties, and conducting some unpredictability tests. Based on our work, nothing's come to our attention that causes us to believe that there is or there was any risk of management override, so we're fairly comfortable. Then if I just jump straight on to item 3 over there in section 3 on page 7, which relates to infrastructure, property, plant and equipment. So in the current year, there was some revaluations of certain classes of assets. We've looked at those revaluations and found them to be appropriate. There's only one matter that we have specifically raised as part of this exercise, where we've noted certain assets that were contributed to the city late last year or in the last quarter of last year. They were missed out in getting recorded. Again, they're non-sort of cash transaction in nature generally, because it's the developer or whoever sort of develops those or incurs those costs, and then the ownership passes on to the city. They were identified as part of this year's exercise. So you would note in sort of the last page of the financial statements, in the note to the prior year restatement, this has now been restated in the previous year, and that's been reflected back appropriately in the books. And the reason this was restated was because the amount involved of $6.2 million is material in the context of the overall financial statement. So it's now reflected appropriately back there. And I guess the only other matter to perhaps point out, which is on the next page, on page 8, under employee benefits expenses. The city has implemented a new ERP system this year, and as part of our audit processes, we've seen that all data transfer, key records, information that comes in from the old system has been transported into the new system correctly, or the data migration has been appropriate. As part of that exercise, we've just noticed one area with respect to leave balances, where there's differences between the information from the old system to the new system, and then information from the new system effectively is extracted to do further mathematical calculations, which sort of go into recording the final number in the books. Overall, based on the reconciliation that management has performed, a little bit more work needs to be done to establish what is the right number that needs to be eventually stated. But we're satisfied that the difference that remains as we speak is not material overall. So we've not insisted on adjusting it, because we didn't want to rush into adjusting something where management still needs to investigate to land onto the final number. So there might be some adjustments that may happen in the next year when the full investigation is conducted to establish what is the appropriate number. Notwithstanding, we're satisfied that the overall range of what that number or error may lie is not overall material, and that remains unadjusted. But the overall financial statements are still materially correct. And then lastly, on the next page, with respect to critical disclosures in the financial statement. So in addition to the numbers, we do look at some key areas of disclosures, including related party transactions, areas that have been subject to accounting estimates, and so on. So we satisfied that all the disclosures have been made in accordance with the requirements of the regulations. They accord with the model financial statements that are produced and reviewed by the OIG and the department as well. So fairly comfortable that the report that you're looking is reasonably good to go through. We'll just take a pause and ask if there's any questions on any of those sort of key areas of focus. Any questions on the matters identified and reported so far?
Through the chair, I just had one query in terms of the contributed assets recognition finding. Just want to understand a little bit more. Obviously, it's a significant rating. I think what you've described, it doesn't have a potential impact on the audit opinion. It's materially correct. Understand there's no prior year rating, so obviously significant typically means that there's underlying control issues and a significant amount of work. So I suppose just trying to put it in context around what we should be considering in terms of this sort of rating and perhaps the basis to highlight it as significant?
Sure. No, thank you. So I guess there are a number of factors that go into determining why the rating is significant. So one of them being the materiality of the transaction, as we mentioned, and just looking at what has actually given rise to, because we've not had this nature of finding in the prior years. This is the first time this has come through. Based on discussion with management, I guess one of the time when this happened in the last quarter was also the time when management was focused on getting the new system in place, including different parts of the business. And perhaps that's where there was a little bit of lapse in this process, or the communication between the engineering or the asset management team to the finance team. And we believe that's sort of caused that gap. So whilst, given the fact that it was at a period of time when the system implementation was about to go live and there was increased focus on one part of activity within the city, unlikely to happen again this year because you've already done the system. But it just brings up a little bit of importance where one series of activity takes the attention away, then the importance of that communication and working through with different areas of the city continue to work, and that does not go away. So yeah, so we're happy with the response in what's been put in within the management letter, management's response in looking at that process and ensuring that that's more formalized and that communication is enhanced when any of such incident takes place again, or a major sort of transaction within the city takes place again.
Thank you. Just in terms of follow-up, in terms of significance, I think you described that it's a transition type of sort of risk, obviously between sort of systems. Is there anything systemic that we should be aware of as an audit risk committee? Because I guess when things are rated as significant, that typically articulates that there's control sort of issues or deficiencies either within the process or the system. So based on some of my understanding, is if that transitory risk is, once we move to the new system, then that risk will remediate itself, or is there any other things contributing, I guess, to the significant rating?
No, I think, yeah. So if when we come back next year, we'll look at what sort of formal mechanism has been put in place to ensure that should any, and I guess the process really involves, this could happen at a time when there is a change in personnel as well. So that's when that communication breakdown as well. In this case, it was a system going live, and hence that communication or probably did not eventuate fully. A similar thing can happen when there is changes in people. So what we will be looking at is what's the mechanism and communication protocol and process that's been put in place to ensure that should anything of that sort happen in the future, the same thing doesn't get missed out again. So we'll follow up, and that's sort of the response that sort of management has advised as well.
Thank you.
Apologies, Chair,
Further
if I can.
questions? Sorry.
Yeah, if I can just add on to what Amit has said as well. From an OEG perspective, some of the key considerations that we have done here is we have sort of considered the nature of the finding with respect to all the other findings of a similar nature that we report upon. And based on that classification, it does fall into the category of significant. And broadly, some of the key consideration we do as well is one, the materiality of the adjustment, as Amit noted, and also secondly, the fact that local governments, just like the city, they all do receive significant quantum of contributed assets year after year. Therefore, the underlying processes and systems that have sort of that are under consideration by management to enhance this it's critical to make sure that they are addressed. Which is why, if you look at our rating of significant, as we put in the management letter, it's those areas or that we would really encourage management to actually action on, because they may, if unresolved, they may potentially result in another significant transaction of that nature. And also the fact that the impact of that issue, which is the 6 million, we actually had to go back to last year's numbers to actually correct them, which, if not corrected, potentially would have resulted in a qualification of the audit opinion. So those are some of the considerations that we do at the OEG level.
Yeah, Thank you for the response. I guess just as a follow-up and I suppose more general in nature, as you went through in terms of the level of sort of control and oversight that occurs as part of the financial statement process, just to give us a bit of indication of how Kwinana is against other local councils. Can you maybe just describe how this, well, rating specifically, but more in general, how our control environment stacks up as part of your review of other local governments?
Do you want me to have a try first? And obviously, Tim, you look up across the broader sector through the OAG, but I'm quite happy to just put our context in the ones that we sort of do and work through with you guys.
Sure, I can give an overarching response, and then you can go to the specifics. Sure. From our perspective, I think, I guess the starting point will always be, I guess, now on the financial statements, there is no qualification or any modification to the financial statements, which is probably the best starting point to begin with. And then obviously, secondly, it's then looking at the control environment, which I think Amit will take us through the next section, which talks about those 10 matters that we've identified. Now, I think overall, looking at the city in comparison with other big local governments, I wouldn't say the city is faring below the rest of them. You'll probably find out in our management letter that most of the points they all relate to the IT environment, which is, I guess, critical in this modern day around cyber risk and all those elements. So yes, while it may be 10 items, but from our office perspective, we come in from a best practice approach, not necessarily to say there is significant, I guess, adverse issues around the city's environment, but it's more to benchmark the city against best practice. And you probably see that consistency across all the local government, not only local government, but also across the state as well. So other than this major finding on the contributed assets, I think one or two of the other findings relating to the non-IT elements, they are all relatively moderate or minor. But then obviously from an IT perspective, it's, the number looks high, but it's more just to reflect the significant focus that we, as the office, we put around just the IT environment. And also that will be consistent if you revisit our results report for local government from last year. There's a specific report just around the IT, and it has got a high volume of observations that we did last year. And I will not be surprised if, again, there'll be quite a focus in terms of the 2023 results, just focusing on the IT environment and what are some of the recommendations there.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. And if I may just add more specific to the city. So from an audit perspective, there have probably been two key changes. One is the system change that the city has gone through, and the other thing is a change in the CFO. So they're both significant change as far as we see from a financial statements controls perspective. I audit some of the other local governments where we've had system changes and we're still going through things because the reconciliations were not done properly. And if you don't do it properly right at the start, you're only constantly playing catch up. So that's quite a big positive to ensure that that's been sorted and those corrected. Now, notwithstanding, there's an observation there, but that's quite small in the scheme of things, because if systems implementation goes wrong, they can go horribly wrong from a financial perspective. So I look at that as being able to deal with that change, and it's bedded very, very, very well compared to others. And the other thing is just a change in personnel. So very often it takes time for a new person to come on board, and get used to and work through that. But I think our team and Vanish's teams have worked very closely and have worked quite effectively, notwithstanding. So that's again a positive, which is really good. So it's people change, system change. They are your typical two distractions. The moment something changes, things do go wrong. But in this case, you had both of those matters, and we're still here on this side of Christmas, talking about reviewing and endorsing the financials. So I would probably just add that as quite a good positive and robust process in place to still make that work well.
Any further questions? Comments?
Yeah, no, not really. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Amit. I have a couple of questions and a comment. Turning to page 97 of the pack, this is actually with respect to the description around the key areas. You can go to that. Yeah, right at the start. Just yep. I'm on this one.
It's in the report, Lindsay. If you just go to the bottom and type in page 97. Other way. No, up. It's up.
That's all right. I think it's better that we take time to find it so that
Yeah,
we're all on the same page, literally. Okay, next one down. Yeah. That's it. Thank you. Just a comment in relating to this part. We do have a number of prior year findings around the IT systems. And the CEO and I discussed these today. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm confident that we won't be seeing those again next year. Would you like to comment on that, Wayne?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, before I comment on that, if I could also just make mention of the team that worked on this, obviously Venetia and Pauline. They did an outstanding work in terms of getting the preparation for the annual report, but also, as was pointed out by the auditors, to move to a new ERP system, to be able to make that transition and to have what are, not some to have some, moderate findings is quite significant. So it's a huge amount of work. Just in terms of IT, I think this is one of the things, as was pointed out by Tim, is that the auditors are looking at best practice against a number of guidelines. Obviously, when I say we, the team, are going through looking at our IT controls, we're basing it upon risk and the level of cost benefit in terms of doing that as well, but also making sure that there is security to our system. So whilst audit are looking for one thing, we're having a whole lot of other processes in place which manage that, and I think there was a little bit of toing and froing with the auditor saying that we had processes in place that we were comfortable that protected our system, but they're going against a set of guidelines. So we've taken that on board. Whilst we probably don't agree with all the responses from the auditors, what we've made the decision is that from a best practice point, and probably more around continual improvement, that we will go through and look at some of those changes. They really are a process change. It's nothing to do with system changes. It's more of just around the processes that we need to do. So we'll make some modifications to that.
Thank you very much. Could we move to the next page, please? I'm just looking at the notes with respect to loss on asset disposals, just at the bottom of that page. Yeah. So I was wondering if management perhaps could just add a little bit more explanation around the actual assets and the magnitude of the adjustment, please, that's been picked up, one as a result of implementing the new module, but to just provide some explanation and context around what's quite a material amount. Thank you.
Through the chair, these are mainly relating to roads that we would have, or any infrastructure, mainly roads, parks, that we would have removed and what you call added a new road. When I say added a new road, I mean resurfaced the road. So this is just basically the disposal of the previous road and added. So we normally would not have done that in the previous system on a continuous basis. And while Tech 1 does that on a continuous basis, you replace you replace the asset on a continuous basis. So that's the differentiation between why there's such a huge increase. And these are mainly infrastructure. We would normally have done it in authority when it's relating to the revaluation time, and all the assets will be updated at that point in time. But now our system is so updated and so detailed, we are able to do that, and that's a plus for the Tech One system.
Well, as an accountant, I'm very excited to do that. So an extension of that then is we would not expect to see this size of write-off.
No, you'll see
In the
this now
future?
continuously.
We will,
Yes.
because you're going to write it all off and then reinstate it
Yeah.
all. And is that consistent with other local governments' accounting policies on roads?
Ideally, it should be, but because we have got the detailed SAM system, this
they
strategic asset
mightn't do it.
management system, we are managing it much more thoroughly at
Yeah.
the moment here.
Yeah.
It's
But
more around the system
it's
allowing
more
you
about
to
the
do the
princip-
mechanics. Yes.
It's
yeah.
a principle though, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Very often it just gets caught within the revaluation and everything gets revalued on top of it.
Okay.
The system limitation and the granularity of maintaining the asset register does pose that problem in being able to identify. So a classic example, which we've seen at least, and it does happen a lot with regional areas as well, where the roads are completely destroyed, they're damaged, they are unable to identify the component because the asset register is not maintained in that level of detail. There's always a little bit of a challenge in actually genuinely disposing it, because that's what's happened. The asset's been totally destroyed, it's washed away or whatever, and then reinstating. So depends on the extent of the damage or the resurfacing or that we do. So that underlying principle till the time that's sort of there, and that gives rise to the significance. So maybe that's the only thing probably worth considering when that happens.
Okay.
That answers. Yeah.
So if it was just a patch up, no. If it's just a part of it being resurfaced, no. But if it's, taking away all the surface and remaking the road, then this accounting treatment makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, we haven't had that one before, so thank you very much. So could I ask, are there any questions from the committee with respect to the financial reports? If there are planning to be a number, I'll go through each financial report one by one.
Through the chair, I guess just to sort of comment, in terms of getting an unqualified audit opinion is, I suppose, something that requires a lot of work. There's a lot of sort of effort in terms of the preparation of financial statements, the assurance and verification activities that management do. So I suppose just for myself, congratulations, to get to that stage. It's hundreds, if not thousands of hours to do it, and that's from a management perspective, from the auditors doing their sort of work. So in terms of the control findings, I think we discussed those, given that they're transitory in nature. Obviously there's some IT issues that sounds like it's something across sort of industry, and we want to get to that best practice, but whilst we sort of strive there, prioritising those things that we can action, I think is a key thing. So just a comment to say, congratulations on a good audit opinion, and really appreciate the additional information that's been sort of given as part of this session.
Well said, thank you. Are there any further questions on the annual accounts? We do have a recommendation. I won't read it out, but it's outlined in full. I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Seconded. Thank you very much, Councillor. All those in favour? Carried. I'm sorry?
That's right. Just
Yep. And nil against. So I'd like to add my thanks to the team. It has been an extraordinary journey with this system, and that means that you really have to pick up and look under every rock and sometimes make some adjustments accordingly. So thanks very much for everyone for your effort. And I'd also like to thank the support of the auditors, RSM and the Office of the Auditor General. We very much appreciate the time and cooperation and attention that you apply to the audit. The committee's very grateful for the work that you do. So thank you very much for your attendance this evening. And I hope you have a not speedy, but efficient journey home. Thank you. Good night. We'll move now to item 10.1, the audit action log. So would management like to speak to this item, please?
Through the chair, the intention of this report is to capture all the audit findings of audits completed since the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting, as well as to keep track of all audit actions completed from historic audits that have yet to be finalised. You'll note that there's been 3 audits completed and their actions added to this report: the interim financial audit, the financial management review by Macquarie Partners, and the community services internal audit by Paxton Group. Just some comments in relation to the notable actions. There's currently 2 actions overdue. Page 16 of the log, the city's rates, collection policy and financial hardship policy do not indicate the date of adoption or the next review date. I can say that the city is working through all of our policies to ensure that we are compliant. That just does take some time. We're roughly halfway through that process, but we're making sure all of our policies are adequately ticked off before we mark that action closed. There's also a second action, page 24 of the log. There's no formal document to record the disposal of assets and the management approval for that disposal. The officer comments for that action are that the city is in the process of finalising that document, but it remains in progress. I'm confident that'll be adequately addressed before the next meeting. The remainder of the historic actions, with the last 5 pages of the audit log, they've all been marked as complete, and so they can be and are recommended for closure at this meeting. I'll just comment in relation to the city's strategic internal audit plan. You will note that we are slightly behind where we ideally would like to be on that plan. This is due to primarily 2 reasons. There was some delay in completing the existing audits, but the primary reason is we undertook 2 failed attempts to recruit an internal auditor onto staff. We unfortunately couldn't find a suitably qualified individual. Unfortunately, the internal auditing process was postponed while we undertook those recruitments, so that's led largely to the delay. We're currently undertaking the Regulation 17 review. Australian Audit are completing that. Every 3 years, the CEO has to be satisfied that the city has adequate systems and procedures in place. They're currently undertaking that audit. Once they complete that audit, they'll continue on with the internal audit plan and hopefully get us back on track. I will note that there's no legislative requirement to undertake internal auditing, so while it's not ideal, we aren't at any risk of being non-compliant with any legislation relating to auditing by being slightly delayed in that regard, although it's certainly not ideal.
Any questions?
Through the chair, thanks very much for the update. In relation to the completion of the 23-24 plan by the end of June, you mentioned a little bit behind now. Do we expect to recover and to execute the 4 audits that we have on the plan?
I would like to say that we would. I couldn't hand on heart swear that we would be at that stage, but look, I'll be working with the auditors and encourage them to do everything they can to try and get us back on track within the year of where we needed to be under this plan.
Perhaps if we could just turn to that page to support that question, please. Would you be able to provide direction to the actual page?
It's in the report.
Yes, it's marked page 8 of the report. So there's a table there of areas of review and where we're at.
So, given the extent to which we have progressed at this point in time, would it be appropriate that at the next meeting, if necessary, the committee provide some guidance on priorities of audits and those that could be deferred? Yes. Wayne?
Through you, Madam Chair, I was actually just going to suggest that. I think because obviously your audit plan should be based upon the level of risk from your activities. I think given where we are at and also the number of audits which have taken place from OAG and other things, that it would probably be an opportune time to do a bit of a recast of this, get some feedback from the Audit and Risk Committee. Perhaps if the committee could also probably have a look at this and then send in some suggestions, we can then build that into a report to come back at the next Audit Committee to have discussion.
So thank you for that. I'd like to flip it. I think that I'd like to see a recommendation from management and then provide the committee with opportunity to comment if they feel strongly about the ones that have been deferred. And if we need to do that between meetings rather than wait until next year, I'd be more than happy to support that. Okay, February is fine. So we'll have that as an action plan. Any further questions? Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, when we're looking at reviewing these reports, obviously I can note that there are certain hours into some of them as well. When we get that feedback, can we go, oh, this one's very close to completion? Because you don't want to put something on the back burner that staff's already involved to that process as well, if we're getting that information to, I guess, give you some direction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that pragmatic suggestion. I'd like to turn to page 24 of the audit log. Bit too far. That's right. Okay, thank you. So this one relates to there being no process of formally documenting and disposal of assets. So can I just clarify, is there really no process, or it hasn't been updated, or it's not complete? Because that was a bit of a surprise to me.
There is a process, and that's within our delegations. Our delegation of authority, basically, there's certain people that can sign off on the purchasing delegations, and the process is basically, current process is that if it's within the budget and the disposal is within the budget, and that is specifically stated in the delegation document. So that is the process, and that's not basically documented properly. And what we're looking going forward is basically having a form that attaches to any disposal that gets authorized, and that's what we're busy putting that together. So, sorry.
So that statement is there is no process of formally documenting. Is that correct then, or not?
I think it's accurate because the process is there, but it's not just documented in that if it went into the budget, if it was in the budget, that was accepted as a disposal. Those items were.
So I guess, I mean, I know I'm nitpicking, but I think that could perhaps be seen as a little misleading. It was not, it's more that there's not an appropriately documented process. Because then when I looked at the risk rating being low, I thought, well, that just didn't make sense for absolutely no process at all, as if anyone could write off assets. Question, Councillor?
With the new technology that you were talking about and how you can track your disposals, does that now have a, I guess, a process within that you can now record your assets better using your new technological system?
Through the chair, yes, certainly. There's lots of opportunities within Tech One that we can do that, but we'll have to configure that. And it's baby steps with Tech One, so we are just need to get everything working currently first, fine, and then we can look at those sort of things.
Any further questions on this item? Thank you.
I guess through the chair, just I suppose one comment in terms of the audit log, having the status with the information around how the actions are progressing is quite positive, and noting that the majority of actions have updates within the last month, the 1st of November. So I guess something as we're sort of looking as a committee, obviously looking at the substance of the actions, but also how frequently you're looking at it. Are we prioritising it? Are we making progress? So just a sort of comment, it's nice to see that, and if that sort of continues on, then it gives us the assurance that that work will continue and we're likely to meet our completion dates.
Thank you. If we could turn to page 7 now, which has the recommendation, officer recommendation. Could I have someone move that recommendation, please? Thank you, Mayor. Second? Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour? That's carried with nil against. Item 10.3, page 255. We're jumping around a lot tonight. The Risk Management Activity Report. Any opening remarks from management, please?
Through the chair, the city currently has 129 recorded risks within our CAMS risk system that we use to record and manage our risks here at the city. 110 operational and 19 strategic risks within the system. In accordance with our risk management strategy and policy, we present all strategic risks to this committee, as well as operational risks that remain high and extreme after we take measures to try and alleviate those risks. There's currently, the same as the October meeting, no operational risks that meet that criteria that are presented to this committee. In relation to the strategic risks, I notice there's been a number of changes that I'll highlight for the committee's benefit. So 2 strategic risks were reviewed and reduced in their residual severity from a higher to a medium. So those risks were SR17, the State Government Waste Avoidance and Resource Recovery Strategy 2030 requirement for a 3-bin FOGO waste system to be implemented across Perth and Peel by 2025. And then again, SR25, impact of impeding reform to the Retirement Villages Act 1992 on the city's ability to operate Banksia Park Retirement Village. As I said, those risks were reviewed and reassessed as being medium rather than a high residual risk. There were 2 risks that were assessed and reduced to a low residual risk from a medium. Those 2 risks were SR2, financial ratios falling below departmental standards, and then SR12, ensuring compliance with work, health and safety legislation and associated regulations. Finally, there was 1 strategic risk that was marked inactive in the system due to there being adequate mitigation for that risk, deeming it not required to be marked active in the system. It remains in the system in the background. We do continue to review it, but it's marked active for this purpose. It's SR19, the city operating services and undertaking projects that are not aligned to the strategic community plan and corporate business plan. So quarterly reports are presented to council on the progress of actions within the strategic community plan and the corporate business plan. We also have teams included, all teams included in their team business plans are required to update and report on their progress towards those on a routine basis. So for that reason, it was marked inactive in the system, and it will continue to be reviewed, but won't be presented to this committee unless for some reason it was reviewed and deemed appropriate to mark active.
Thank you. Any questions on the heat map, please?
Through the chair, thanks again for the reporting. I think obviously it's continued on in terms of giving us visibility, so I appreciate the introduction. I guess one thing in terms of the summary, we're referencing there's no high or extreme operational risks, which is important because we've set tolerability to say we as a business don't accept extreme or high risks, which is what our risk information is showing, but there are a couple of strategic risks that are high and therefore at a tolerance. So I think just in terms of completeness, then it's useful to include that information as part of the reporting, just to make sure that we as a committee, I suppose, understand both operationally and strategically that the risks which were say out of tolerance we I suppose highlighted, and therefore we can dig into a little bit more detail. So maybe just through the chair, just a recommendation: if we have any risks, whether they're operational or strategic, we include specific reference within our summary risk information.
With respect to the changes, Ben, or?
No, so if we have any risks that are outside of tolerance.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
so I think we should be highlighting
Oh,
those.
yes, that's...
Yeah, and then, because I guess the key thing for us is, if we have visibility of those, then we'd be looking at what's our plan to bring it to tolerability.
Yep.
So we expect to have management actions, recommendations, additional new controls, etc.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Certainly picking up on your point, Ben, I think one of the things which we've highlighted before is that we've identified that we do need to do a bit more training with staff around not just the identification of risk, but how you go through and manage them, put controls, residuals into base, and how you then assess the residual risk. I think part of it is that there is probably an overly cautious approach in terms of the controls that have been put in place and the success of those controls. So one of the things in the new year will be to do a bit of that training, which we've identified as required, but then to also then go through and do another reassessment of these strategic risks. I think that a number of the controls in place do manage them quite adequately, so I think there needs to be a little bit of re-baselining of those.
Great, thank you. And I guess through the chair, as a sort of follow-up, in terms of the risk refresher or fundamentals, whether that might be an opportunity for committee members to participate in a sort of session. I think obviously in terms of having that sort of risk background, and for us as a committee to understand the risk information and to be able to ask the questions, perhaps there's an opportunity just to extend the invite when that training is scheduled.
Great suggestion. Thank you very much. I have one question, and it's about the waste bins, the 3-bin FOGO. What exactly has changed?
Through the chair, the state strategy hasn't changed in terms of the commitment to the 2025 3-bin FOGO. What has changed is certainly a softening from the state in terms of the potential for any penalty arising from not meeting that obligation or any issue of compliance to local governments. So in the last 6 months, in the meetings that the city has had with the various state government representatives, it certainly is a move to review some of those targets with the pending review of the waste state strategy. And certainly when the city has reviewed it's presented its feasibility study, which the council adopted, and put forward our business case for the 3-bin GO system. The state once again didn't, in responding to the city's position, whilst indicated that we weren't consistent with the state waste strategy, certainly applauded the city's work in actually supporting the position that we have taken, and have invited us to participate in the state waste strategy review when that comes online, which was supposed to be by the end of this year. So we expect that there will be some variation to the targets and the requirements of the state.
Okay, so to clarify, it's a timing and penalty perception change. Is there still an intent to implement whatever comes out of the state strategy? And I'm thinking of it in terms of the community expectation around waste management, and therefore the risks still potentially being there, even if it's can take longer to be implemented.
That's correct. That's why it's only gone to a medium. As part of our city's feasibility study, we undertook a really significant multi-criteria assessment of the three bin options, and that included that community engagement and community perception. That was one of the reasons why the city has progressed to a three bin system, but not in readiness for a FOGO at this point in time because of the market maturity in terms of FOGO processing and FOGO facilities. It was with that we're not ruling out a three bin FOGO in time, but it is about a timing issue and when it's right for our community's ability to pay for that service as well as for us to provide that service. So the state government understand that, and we've been quite transparent with our feasibility study in that regard.
Thank you. And just one other question on SR2, the financial ratios falling behind the Department of Local Government standards. So reading this, it's because we don't have to include them in our annual financial statements. So that's how I'm reading these comments, but we are going to include them in our budget. Is that correct? And does that in any way increase the risk?
I'll start, and then Venetia can sort of cover off parts that I miss. That's sort of partly correct. So whilst there's no requirement to report them now, we still have them as part of our annual report, and certainly it is a measure that we have in terms of our ongoing financial sustainability as well. So particularly asset renewal, liquidity ratios are particularly important. So we'll still have those within the report, which we will report within it, but it's not a requirement. So that's not to say we've just ignored them. We are still following the basis to them.
Thank you. Any final questions? Could we move to the officer's recommendation, please? I'm happy to move the recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour? Carried, nil against. The Work Health and Safety Statistical Report on page 276. Any opening remarks by management?
Just wait for questions.
No remarks? Okay, any questions? Thank you.
Just one question. Process-wise, I think we've talked around that for each of the incidents as an investigation process to understand the issue, implement any remedial actions. Just want to confirm that there's a process around managing that the investigation does occur, the actions are captured and sort of closed out as part of your normal management routines.
Yeah, through the chair, there is a process. So the audit, not the audit risk committee, that's this one. The safety committee does monitor all incidents and the reporting. So we report at each committee, which is monthly, on outstanding investigations, and then we also report on outstanding actions. That was a key thing with the new software, was to make sure that we were tracking all corrective actions and making sure they closed out.
Cool, thank you. No other questions?
I have one question. So thank you very much for the report. Is any consideration being given to psychosocial hazards, measuring and reporting?
Through you, Madam Chair. So a lot of work's been done around the psychosocial hazards, particularly training for staff. In terms of measuring and recording, they will be captured exactly the same as any other workplace injury or hazard which occurs. So if a person presents or reports that particular issue, that will still get captured, and then there will be investigated in terms of what were some of the triggers for it, and how do we ensure that doesn't occur in the future.
Thank you. Just in the interest of sharing better practice, some organisations are conducting staff surveys with a focus around psychosocial
So we've got a staff
hazards.
engagement survey coming up.
Great, and it covers that area.
Correct.
Yep, that's excellent. Thank you very much. Moving to the officer recommendation in the absence of any further questions. Oh, yes. Yes, of course. I beg your pardon.
Thank you, through the chair. Just notice with your incidents, the City Life Directorate seems to be the bulk of them. Is there any other controls or practices, being that I guess they are engaging with people that potentially are putting them further at risk? Have we looked at how they can better protect themselves, or if there's any room for improvement, being that they are engaging directly with the public?
Yeah, through the chair. So obviously the City Life Director has the bulk, and I suppose they have the bulk of the kind of contact with public, as you're right. So obviously there's lots of training and processes we put in place. Every time we have an incident, obviously we work through that incident with the staff members, and if there's a need for training or any other actions, we put those into place.
Moving to the officer recommendation. Thank you, Mayor. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor. All those in favour? Carried. Nil against. Moving now to the One Council project, 10.5.
Take those questions.
Ah, no introductory remarks.
We can. Do you want to?
You don't have to. It's just an invitation.
Through the chair, I haven't prepared anything. The updates aren't particularly exciting meeting to meeting, because compared to the phase one, this one is going quite well, and it's the approach that we're taking. The copy config approach has made it a lot easier and a lot smoother process. There are still risks, and we are monitoring those. The main risk we identified at the start of phase two is the same risk we had throughout the project, and that's the risk of losing a critical person. And there's not a lot we can do with the size of our organisation, but we're continuing to think through options to address that if wherever those options present.
Thank you. Questions? So just turning to page 288 of the papers, and the cumulative dollars spent.
That's a great graph.
It is a great graph. And I'm sure we can all read it, but are we on track to deliver the same scope within the budget? And is the dollars spent an accurate measurement of activity required to complete?
Through the chair, the graph shows we were tracking ahead of schedule right up until the end of October. Now we're slightly behind, but in terms of money spent, we are under budget. So we're on track financially, slightly dipping below ideal on program. We did grill our project manager on this at our last meeting, just to confirm that we don't foresee that we won't hit our final go live date, which I believe is the end of 2024. So he's got no concerns that we won't. There are, we note within the report a couple of things about the rates module and our plans to get confirmation from the Tech One CEO that they will be ready. We also understand that two West Australian councils are going live. Actually, one may have already gone live this week, and another one maybe next week. So that's given us a lot more confidence that we will be fine to get this all in by the end of 2024.
Great answer. Thank you. Moving to the officer's recommendation. that we note the project update. We've had an opportunity to provide feedback. Yes, one more question, please. Oh.
Sorry, I was slightly ahead of us.
That's okay. So that has been, the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Sargent. Thank you, Mayor. All those in favour? Carried, nil against. Are there any items of late or urgent business? And there are no questions which were to be taken on notice. So this is the final meeting for the year. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to extend our thanks to management for all your hard work and effort, and as previously articulated, bringing forward a clean set of annual accounts when there's so much change occurring is something to be really celebrated. I'm sure you're all looking forward to a break over the festive season, and I'd like to wish you a very happy festive season and some time off. I'd also like to thank the committee very much for your participation in the Audit and Risk Committee meeting agendas. I believe this is a really important important committee, and I hope that it's serving the council well. So thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Happy festive season, safe travel. Thank you.